Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan El Rome.
In our top story, Iran is on the brink of collapse, and Israeli leaders are calling on the international community to back the protesters. The people of Iran are boldly standing up to the radical Ayatollah's regime and are calling for Reza Pahlavi, the crown prince in exile, to restore democracy to their country. Unfortunately, they are paying a heavy price. Iranian authorities have brutally murdered dozens of dissidents, and hundreds have been arrested. U.S. President Donald Trump warned that the United States is locked and loaded and ready to intervene to protect the peaceful protesters in Iran. Member of Knesset Gila Gamliel has spearheaded the Israeli campaign in support of the people of Iran and their future under Pahlavi's leadership. Gamliel has hosted Pahlavi and his team in the Jewish state, and together they have launched an initiative dubbed the Cyrus Accords, calling for peace and cooperation with a new Iran under Pahlavi's leadership.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised President Donald Trump for his decisive stand for justice and freedom in Venezuela. His comments came after U.S. forces captured notorious South American dictator Nicolas Maduro and his wife in the capital Caracas. Speaking at the Knesset's weekly cabinet meeting in Jerusalem, Netanyahu commended President Trump's decision and saluted the U.S. military forces that carried out the operation. Netanyahu revealed that Latin America is moving closer to the United States and Israel. He said, "We are seeing a turnaround. Quite a few countries are returning to the American axis and to ties with Israel."
The Hamas terror group must disarm in order for the Gaza truce to proceed. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was hosted by President Trump in Florida over New Year's, where the world leaders discussed the fragile Gaza peace deal. Netanyahu said that President Trump is unequivocal that Hamas must relinquish its weapons. This is a necessary and fundamental condition for the implementation of his 20-point plan. Netanyahu said the president made no concessions and showed no flexibility on this matter. During the visit, President Trump told reporters that he wants to move to phase 2 of the plan as quickly as possible and that Hamas has a very short time to demilitarize, or there will be hell to pay.
Senior Syrian and Israeli officials met in Paris recently for U.S. brokered negotiations. This is the 5th round of talks in just 2 months, and U.S. President Donald Trump is pressuring all sides to come to an agreement. Israeli ambassador to the United States, Yechiel Leiter, was appointed to lead the latest negotiations. He's been tasked with making a security agreement that demands the demilitarization of southern Syria. Radical Islamists in the region have massacred ethnic minorities and are entrenched along the border, creating an existential threat to the Jewish state. The IDF moved in to secure a buffer zone to ensure the safety of the citizens of the north. Jerusalem reiterated that it will not pull back from the Syrian border until the jihadist threat is neutralized, despite demands by Damascus that Israel withdraw. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu confirmed that the two countries made an agreement to continue the dialogue in order to advance common goals and to ensure the safety of minorities in Syria.
Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar was in Somaliland for the first official visit since Jerusalem recognized the African state. Sa'ar was greeted by President Abdirahman Mohamed Abdullahi in the capital, Hargeisa. Somaliland is located on the Horn of Africa, on the coast of the Red Sea, making it a strategic ally of the Jewish state. Israeli media has reported that the Mossad briefed a Knesset meeting of the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, saying recognition of Somaliland has significant security implications.
Radical Islamists around the world are praising the United Kingdom for its decision to reward terrorism with diplomatic legitimacy by inaugurating a Palestinian embassy in London. England joined France, Australia, and Canada in recognizing a Palestinian state in September, despite despicable acts of murder and terrorism. Now London has granted the Palestinian mission full embassy status and diplomatic privileges. The implications are astounding. The Palestinian Authority continues to incite terror by paying salaries to terrorists and their families. It's taking international financial assistance and using it to facilitate terrorism. Arab leaders welcome the move as a profound milestone in British-Palestinian relations. However, others are concerned that terrorists will exploit their diplomatic immunity to commit further acts of murder, violence, and anti-Semitic attacks.
In what is being hailed as a phenomenal week in Israeli fencing, Israel's men's and women's teams won first place at separate events in Abu Dhabi and Switzerland last week. Israel's under-23 fencing team won the gold medal at the European Fencing Championship in Estonia in April, and this new win has put the spotlight back on the sport. In related news, Israeli skier Noah Zolis earned Israel's first ever World Cup points in alpine skiing. Team Israel called Noah's performance in Slovenia history on the slopes and congratulated her for this breakthrough achievement.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has announced a new front in defending Christians from Islamist persecution. Netanyahu highlighted the relationship between Christians and Israel, calling it an enormous partnership. He told a group of distinguished Christian pastors that the attacks on the Jewish state are not just Israel's battle, but a fight for the future of Judeo-Christian values and Western civilization. Netanyahu lamented the persecution of Christians throughout the Middle East and noted that Israel is the exception. He said only one country protects the Christian community, enables it to grow, defends it, and makes sure that it thrives, and that country is Israel.
Spain has issued an anti-Semitic ban on products produced by Jews in the biblical heartland of Judea, Samaria, the Golan Heights, and parts of Jerusalem. The Spanish Ministry of Finance announced that Madrid will become the first major European Union state to adopt such a policy. Enrique Martinez Olmos, the editor-in-chief of the Estadio news site, described the ban as a measure Hitler would endorse. He said the ban prohibits Jewish products, much like in 1930s Germany.
Zoran Mamdani, the newly elected mayor of New York City, has revoked a series of laws meant to protect Jews in the Big Apple. The controversial new mayor rejected pro-Israel measures enacted by Eric Adams in a sweeping nullification of his predecessor's executive orders. Mamdani is notoriously anti-Israel and continues to refuse to recognize the only Jewish state's right to exist. Jews in New York City say they are feeling increasingly unsafe. They believe the sudden loss of these protections has left them even more vulnerable to rising anti-Semitism in the city.
Defense Minister Israel Katz has announced that for the first time in over a quarter of a century, pilgrims will be able to pray at Joseph's tomb in Shrem during daylight hours. Located in the modern PA-controlled city of Nablus, Joseph's tomb has been plagued by Arab violence. The shrine has been repeatedly vandalized, desecrated, and burned, and faithful pilgrims have been attacked while attempting to pray there. People of faith have been restricted to visiting the site of the Jewish patriarch at night under military escort. Now, Israel's Ministry of Defense has committed to extending visiting hours to allow daytime prayers at Joseph's tomb.
The Israel Defense Forces released its annual operation figures, confirming that it carried out nearly 21,000 military strikes in 430 operations in Gaza, Iran, Iraq, Lebanon, and Yemen in the year 2025. More than 306,000 IDF reservists were called up last year. Tragically, 91 Israeli soldiers were killed in action, and more than 800 were wounded during the Seven-Front War of Redemption. Israel's unparalleled military victory in the two-year conflict shocked the world. It reminded Israelis of God's promise in Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 4, to go before them in battle and give them victory over their enemies.
American ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee and his family discovered a treasure trove of ancient coins while exploring a cave system in Samaria. The coins were found with pottery dating to the 2nd century CE, around the time of the Bar Kokhba revolt. Israel Gantz, the council head for the Benjamin region, hailed the discovery as the best proof of our historical right to every part of the land of Israel. The Hackabees traveled through the Benjamin region and also visited Shiloh, the first capital of Israel and home to the Ark of the Covenant, for 369 years.
That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. We're here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Member of Parliament from Canada, Shuvaloy Majumdar. Shuv, thank you for being on the show.
Glad to be here. Thank you so much.
So a lot going on in Canada. We're seeing a lot of anti-Semitism. We're seeing a lot of attacks on Israel. What's happening?
Listen, 2 years ago, the world inverted on itself. We've seen an epidemic of anti-Semitism unleashed upon our Jewish world, not just in Canada, but around the world. And in Canada, it's been felt particularly painfully with attacks on synagogues, harassment of communities regularly, protests that are meant to dominate, not to express freedom and uphold freedom in our country, but rather subjugate people to a terrible extremist ideology. And it hasn't been confronted for too long across our academy, our media, our bureaucracy, our political class. We have not seen the iron will necessary to respond to this type of extremism with strength. Instead, we've seen a pacification, a coddling of it, and it has metastasized into some very troubling events across our country.
You know what's scary about this time around? Because there's always anti-Semitism. It's that the liberal government seems to be complicit in it. You have videos of cops, handing out coffee to violent protesters. You don't have any arrests. You have all these different attacks on the Jewish community, and the government seems to be okay with it. How does that affect anti-Semitism in Canada?
It emboldens it, and it makes it bigger. It gives license to it. It allows it to be seen as legitimate rather than curbing it with de-radicalization. One of the horrific things we've seen is that the government in Ottawa, with its public safety and justice ministers, have not responded to this type of violent extremism and the celebration of rape, murder, and chaos with strength. What we've seen instead is a coddling of it. What they should be doing is meeting every single day, explaining to the prosecutors and law enforcement exactly what the law is. We already have amazing laws in the book to deal with hate crimes and with terror crimes, with terror designations and with the promotion of terrorism. And those laws need to be enforced.
It seems that the Carney government is actually doing the opposite of what you just spoke about right now. They've recognized a Palestinian terror state. They have called for boycotts on Israel during wartime. I mean, they're not just not doing those things, they're actually leaning into the other side. Why would they do that? What's the rationale behind it?
It's appeasement. It's betrayal. It's been something I rose in the House of Commons to pronounce on because I felt that this was a moment of absolute moral failing. Whether it's the government of Justin Trudeau or now the government of Mark Carney. They have a basic responsibility in government, which is to protect every single Canadian and to ensure the religious freedoms of all Canadians. Instead, they've been empowering the harassment of our Jewish communities. They've rewarded terrorism with a state. They have not acted in a way that they themselves say they would. They promised that they wouldn't recognize the so-called Palestinian state unless a small number of conditions were met. None of those conditions were met. And so it's really just about pandering to constituencies inside Canada that I believe that they have to think there's some political benefit. But what I worry is that their partisan interest in the short term is coming at the expense of our national interest in the long term. And that's how craven, I think, and unprincipled this government has been.
Shiv, you are in the opposition. You are the head of the National Security Council for the Conservative Party. What would you do differently?
I think that our government, led by Prime Minister Pierre Poilievre, would respond with strength. And we've made it clear time and again over these last 2 years. We would enforce the rule of law. We would compel our federal security agencies, our law enforcement organizations, our prosecutors to enforce hate and terror laws. If those laws need updating, which maybe some modest tweaks are necessary to really carry out the extent of the law, then we would embrace those too. But I think at the end of the day, we would loudly and clearly root and branch go after anti-Semitism across our country. We know that anti-Semitism isn't just about our Jewish friends, our Jewish families, our Jewish businesses. It's about our country. It's about the rule of law for every Canadian.
We're seeing incredible support from the Trump administration in America. We're seeing other countries move their embassies to Jerusalem. There's the Abraham Accords. A lot of different countries are starting to move into that. So we're seeing a lot of support for Israel in countries around the world. What's the future of Canada-Israel relations?
I think today it's probably not an overstatement to say that it's the low point between governments. Even if my party, which represents over 8 million supporters across the country in a very narrowly contested election this year, we represent a massive constituency in the country that is determined to understand the world for what it is, our threats for what they are, and our partnerships in realizing the best possible future for every Canadian, which in my view is also in concert with the best possible future for every Israeli. When it comes to the changing Middle East and the Indo-Pacific future, the next half century of global growth will be a derivative of everything from this particular region across Asia. Canada needs to do a lot more in taking its Pacific and Indo-Pacific identity seriously. The Abraham Accords is one of the most important advents of international relations in the last decade, if not the last century. I think it's one of the key things that are realigning our global architecture for security and for economy. Canada has a lot to contribute in terms of beneficial relationships in energy, investment, technology, and so on. I'm of the view that, the Canada of the 21st century will embrace this identity with strength, will act with these partnerships in ways that are great for every Canadian, and hopefully stabilize the world.
Shiv, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
Leviticus 19:18, love thy neighbor as you would love yourself. From Moses at Sinai through the teachings of Jesus Christ, we have the basis for what has become the seed of Western democracy. So stand firm in defending it. Stand firm in defending our values, our heritage, our inheritance, and the promise for what that affords for the next millennia to come.
Thank you, Shiv, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
And now the truth from Zion.
Iran has steadily increased its presence in Africa. This is a deliberate effort by Tehran to expand its power, challenge the West, and secure new ground for its revolutionary ideology. The hardline Islamic Republic uses a combination of religious outreach, trade deals, arms shipments, and political training to spread its influence. The goal is not just economic, it's ideological and strategic. Africa is seen as fertile ground for exporting Iran's anti-Western, anti-Israel worldview. Diplomatically, Iran has restored and strengthened ties with dozens of African nations. Iranian foreign ministers regularly visit African capitals, offering cooperation on infrastructure, agriculture, and energy. In return, Iran secures diplomatic backing in international forums like the United Nations, where African votes are often decisive. Economically, Iran sees Africa as both a customer and a workaround. Sanctions have made it harder for Tehran to sell oil openly, so African ports and companies become useful partners in evading restrictions. Iran also offers subsidized fuel, low-cost weapons, and technical cooperation in exchange for mining access or political support. On the religious front, Tehran exports its radical ideology through mosques, schools, and scholarships. Iranian-backed Shiite centers have appeared in countries where the local population was previously Sunni or secular. Iranian-aligned clerics now influence thousands of people in places like Nigeria, Ghana, and Senegal. Security ties are growing as well. In some regions, Iran provides weapons and training to militias under the label of resistance. They have been linked to smuggling routes that run through Libya and the Sahel region of Africa. Information warfare is also part of the strategy. Iran operates media outlets in multiple African languages and maintains online networks that push anti-Western and anti-Israel narratives. These platforms blend local news with propaganda. They target young, disaffected populations. The message is consistent. The West is exploiting you, and Iran is your ally. Iran is not building schools and clinics out of generosity. It is buying loyalty, building influence networks, and shaping the political future of entire regions. Iranian money has already penetrated local elections and political parties in some countries. Security services across Africa have raised alarms about foreign interference, extremist recruitment, and covert financing tied to Tehran. Israel and the West must take this seriously. Africa is not just a humanitarian concern or a trade opportunity. It is a battleground of ideas, alliances, and long-term strategic positioning. Iran understands this and has moved quickly to fill the vacuum left by others. One example is Nigeria, where the Iranian-backed Islamic movement has grown increasingly militant. Its leader, Ibrahim Zakzaki, openly models his group on the Iranian revolutionary. Violent clashes with Nigerian authorities have drawn global concern, but Iran continues to support him. In East Africa, Iranian operatives have been arrested while planning attacks on Israeli and Western targets. In Southern Africa, Iranian-linked plots have been uncovered against American diplomatic personnel. The economic aspect must also be understood as part of the broader picture. Iran uses trade and infrastructure deals to bypass sanctions and reward loyal partners. Iran's playbook in Africa looks a lot like what it used in Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq. It is just adapted to a new terrain. The goal is to embed loyalists in political, religious, and military systems, and to wait for the influence to ripen. African nations deserve real partners, ones who invest without ideology and support peace without arming militias. Israel and its allies should be part of that future. African countries can benefit from Israeli innovation in agriculture, water, medicine, and education, but they must see clearly who their friends are and who is trying to manipulate them. Tehran wants a continent that supports its agenda and helps it survive pressure from the West. It wants African governments to vote its way at the United Nations, to host its envoys, to welcome its weapons, and to remain silent about its nuclear ambitions.
The terror regime in Iran has infiltrated all aspects of African society. Africa as a continent needs to wake up before it is too late.
Iran is working to shape the next generation of leaders, soldiers, and citizens in Africa. If it succeeds, the consequences will be global. From Jerusalem, this is the truth from Zion. Up next, shining light from Israel.
We are continuing on our quest to explore the Holy Land and connect to our biblical heritage. One of the most powerful ways to connect with our forefathers is to walk in their footsteps. And what better way to do that than to walk on the very path that they themselves walked? That's what brings us today to this road, known as Derech HaAvot, or the path of the patriarchs. Come, walk with me. This stone is a real milestone. No, actually, it's a real milestone. The Romans used to put stones like this every mile on roads that were major thoroughfares. This stone connects us to the city of Jerusalem. We have found dozens of stones just like it with inscriptions on it letting you know how far away you were or how close you were to the city of Jerusalem. This particular stone is 12 Roman miles away from the city of Aelia Capitolina, as Jerusalem was known back in the Roman period, so that a traveler along the way would know just how far he had to go to get to the holy city. Along the path of the patriarchs, archaeologists have found a number of these mile markers, some of them still with the writing on it, chiseled into it 2,000 years ago. The Patriarch's Path was primarily a road that was used by pilgrims to go to Jerusalem on the 3 pilgrimage festivals. Along the way, there were different things on the sides of the road that were set up for the ease and convenience of those pilgrims as they went to the holy city. Here's something that they found along the Patriarch's Path. This is a public ritual bath, and it's one of dozens that they've found along this way. We know that it's a public ritual bath because there's a divider on the staircase. One of the requirements for going to Jerusalem on the pilgrimage festival is that one would show up in a state of ritual purity. One side is for the impure people going down into the water, and the other side is for the purified people coming out. And you wouldn't want to touch an impure person as you're coming out of the ritual bath. We are now inside the ritual bath, carved out of the very limestone of the mountain all around us. Nowadays, it doesn't hold much water because limestone's not very good at holding water. But we can still see some of the waterproofing agent that was used 2,000 years ago to ensure that this ritual bath held enough water to purify all of the pilgrims heading on their way to the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. In the first book of Maccabees, chapter 6, we read about the death of Eleazar, younger brother of Judah Maccabee. Apparently, the Jewish rebel forces were giving the Greeks such a hard time that the Greeks violated their treaty with the Roman Empire and brought out battle elephants to put down the Jewish revolt. The Jews saw these battle elephants and were afraid. They thought they were unkillable monsters. Eleazar wanted to show them that they could be killed, and so he ran at the lead elephant and he stabbed it with a very long spear, showing the other Jews that these elephants could be killed in battle. Unfortunately, the elephant fell onto Eleazar, killing him in the process. The Jews redoubled their efforts and fought valiantly, but in the end, the victory went to the Greeks. In the 1960s, modern Jewish pioneers established this town and named it Eleazar, after the valiant sacrifice of the hero who died not far from where we're standing right now. There's a lot more ground left to cover on the path of the patriarchs before the sun sets. I'm going to continue on my path, connecting to my biblical heritage. And as always, I hope you can come and join us.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan El Rome, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.